My name is Michael Lane. I'm the president of Liftport Group. Tonight we have a terrific guest, and we've got a bunch of stuff going on. I'm pretty happy about how things are starting. We've been doing this for a little over 2 months now, and we've had some terrific guests like Dr. Andrew Aldrin, professor at Embry-Riddle. We've had Dr. Greg Autry is scheduled soon. Um, we've had James Burke, the executive director of the Mars Society, Laura Forsick. So we've had some pretty terrific guests. I'm pretty happy about that. So thank you, folks, for being a part of that. A couple of weeks ago, I dissected a new national policy on that came out of the White House, which was pretty interesting. And then going forward, we've got James Burke coming back next week. We've got Doug Plata, a new with a new space member organization. We've got Hal Fulton coming in with a new space membership organization, advocacy organization. Yeah, it's been pretty exciting. We're doing this twice a week now, Mondays and Wednesdays. And we usually start it with a guest. It's usually a back and forth between our guests. Sometimes we've tested the water with another format of just reviewing the news, and sometimes we've tested the format of looking at national space policy. But tonight, I'm really, really excited to bring in Dr. Robert Zubrin. He is the founder of the, I think it's now 26-year-old Mars Society. Is it Mars Society 26 years old, sir?
Mars Society is 24 years old.
24.
Founded in 98.
Okay. So do you have a way that you can increase your microphone? It's a little on the quiet side.
Well, I don't know.
Might be on my side. Give me a second. There. That's a little bit better. Okay. Well, sir, the way we usually do this is we start with about 10 minutes of background, a little bit about your personal story, not so much the professional side, but just how did you get here in the first place? And then we'll spend some time talking about the Mars Society, and then we'll focus in the last maybe 20 minutes on the money, the finance, the capitalization of space. So I'm really excited to hear a bit about your personal story. We already have some questions from the audience that I'm looking forward to sharing. So can you give us, it's funny, sir, there are so many people new to this field, new to this industry, fans coming on board that have really just started. So even though you've been at this for a long time, even though I've been at this for a long time, I find it very helpful for people to get background and the history of where we are, which is one of the reasons, by the way, we brought in Dr. Roger Lanius as NASA's historian and the Smithsonian's curator, because I think it's really important to give the background and the history of where we are. So could you give a little bit of background about who you are, how you came to this?
I was born in 52, so I was five when Sputnik. And while to the adults, Sputnik, because it meant the Soviets could hit us, to me as a child, it was absolutely because I was already reading science fiction. I was an early reader. And what Sputnik was that all these stories about space travel were going to be true. And I wanted to be part and my parents encouraged my interest. My father got me a telescope. I could drawings of the moon and so forth. And a little later, I got into rockets and stuff, and I learned all the science. And so there I was growing up in the 60s, 9 when Kennedy gave his speech, 17. And, we were going to the moon by 1970, Mars by 1980, Saturn, Alpha Centauri by the year 2000. I was all in. We did, of course, realize the first point in that program. We did make it to the moon before. The Nixon administration then basically called, they canceled NASA's plans to go to Mars. They canceled NASA's plans. So I'm in college in the early 70s now, and part of the first generation of my family to go to college. The idea of going to college was to have a trade, and the real world got to me. It's fine to want to be a space explorer when you're 12 years old, but now you're growing, got to get a trade, okay? And the space program basically retracting, at least in the most visible ways. And so I said, okay, I knew a lot of science, got myself certified, began to teach secondary, and I did that on and off for about 7 years. But 3, I'm living in northern Manhattan and teaching in Brooklyn and commuting in my subway in the morning and the evening and reading novels by Herman Melville about sailing the South Sea. What am I doing here? I didn't sign up for this. And this thing called graduate school. And engineer if I went to graduate school. Because my undergraduate, it wasn't in education. So I went to graduate school, and I majored in nuclear engineering because that fusion power was going to be the most important thing to happen in the remaining part of it. And so while I'm doing that, and I also draw space because there was an overlap in the classes. Heard about the ground. People of my own age, my own generation, graduate students, they were in Colorado. But, they had started holding these conferences called the Case for Mars. They were saying, weren't we supposed to go to Mars after the moon? What this is the kind of space program we should have. I certainly agreed with that. So I went to their third conference, which was in 1987, 1,000 people. Thomas Paine, who had been NASA administrator when we landed on the moon. He's a great guy, by the way. And, this was it. And I made them, was leading the program in Mars mission design at Marietta. We're in Colorado. And I met him, made contact, got him his resume. He eventually got hired. And to do preliminary design of interplanetary missions. So doing that I came up with this plan known as the Mars Direct plan, an engineer named David Baker. And, as in 1989 had come out for what was called the Space Exploration Initiative, back to the day, all that. And NASA basically sabotaged it by, rather than a concise plan to realize that goal, they basically used the nominal imperative of going to Mars to hang all the ornaments and basically designed the most complicated mission plan they possibly could in order to program Mission Critical, which is the exact opposite of the correct way to do engineering. And saw that, and they realized that if that's where the matter was left, initiative. And a number of us engineers pushed that point with them, and they established this team. And well, the scenario plans. One was our Mars Direct plan. There were two others. And the Martin people managed not to try to reconcile the plans to come up with a company party line because you couldn't fit behind the plans was totally different. And we just floated. It became clear that Mars Direct had the most chance, most radical break with the existing thinking, and it immediately became extremely controversial, a lot of opposition. And but eventually, Mike Griffin, who he became associate of space exploration. Much later on, he became mass administrator, but at this point, associate administrator. Exploration, he heard about it. He had me come in and brief him. He then told me to go back to Johnson Space, and with this time the boss telling him, you got to listen to this guy. And came up with their own version of Mars Direct. Didn't completely satisfy me. It was ships, more equipment, more of everything. Required 3 launches per mission instead of 2. But it was the same basic idea: direct launch to Mars, no on-orbit Martian resources starting on the first mission. Long duration stays on Mars. The principles of Mars Direct was just somewhat less. And they costed it out. That is a whole program based on this mission architecture. Costed the 90-day report. That is the official response to the Bush's space exploration. So they costed this out at 55. And that was using the same costing models. And, well, there. So now we're in 1994 moon landing. And Newsweek is sniffing around for a story, and they heard about this. And it was the cover. We went to the moon. Now we should go to the next place, and there's a plan to. I had the cover story in Newsweek on the 25th anniversary of Apollo, and that was cool. A lot of contacts, and one of them, I'm sitting at my desk at Martin, and his woman's voice, and she says, "Hi, I'm a literary agent. Have you ever thought of writing a book? A spy novel. I couldn't get it published." And she said, "Well, were you ever a spy?" I said, "No." "Literary agent?" "No." "Well, you are an astronautical engineer, and I am a literary agent, and if you publish." And thus was born the book, The Case for Mars, which came out in '96. It was a tremendous success. Through 4 printings in 2 months, all selling out. Then we went to soft cover, and over 100. I got 4,000 letters, a few emails, but mostly actual stamped letters. Imagine what that looks like. And the people in all kinds of places. There were engineers at JPL and astronauts from Johnson, but there were 12-year-old kids in platoon and stockbrokers and the guy running the opera in New York City and the banker in Paris and Congressional Medal of Honor taking on a Japanese carrier in World War II. And and you look this incredible assortment of people who had responded to this. It was an incredible array, and they said all kinds of things, but you see, behind everything they said, there was one real question, which was, how do we make this happen?
Right.
And
just to verify, you said this was 1994 this was happening.
Well, 94 was Newsweek, the book actually
Yeah.
came. And So I went to the other Mars, Carol Stoker, and so forth, and I said, "Look at this! Look at this! If we could pull these people together, we'd have a." So we called the founding convention of the Mars Society in Boulder in '98. 700. The New York Times and the Washington Post and the BBC and other. We came out of the conference with an organization to do three things: spread the vision, political work to defend and expand the existing Mars projects of our own, of which the most important and best known is our building of the research station and then the Mars Desert Research Station, in which you could live on Earth. This was an idea. It wasn't an original idea with us. This idea had been around since the 60s, but never.
Right.
And it's kind of an obvious idea. And but we actually made, and in fact, crew number 269 from the Aerospace Corporation Research Station right now as we speak.
Wow.
And we're doing all kinds of things there, by the way, in the near future. What we've done, camera team out there to the desert, and they have photographed several square kilometers and sophisticated it as a virtual reality landscape. Okay, that is several square. The desert near our station is now in a virtual reality thing, and is we're gonna do an exercise, possibly at the Seattle Science Center, if not there, then where we go there for a weekend and with the reality gear, and the guests put it on and walk around in the desert in virtual reality, not a make-believe fine arts, but actual the terrain that's really there. They'll be walking around it, the same related astronauts walking around the very same terrain. So they'll be kind of like ghost companions, and they'll be able to say, "Hey, that rock over there? That looks. You go take a hammer to it. Let's take a sample from that." And what we're is demonstrating a mode of exploration for NASA to actually do on the Moon and Mars with robotic rovers, and it could eventually be done in conjunction with actual right. And it's a way to enormously expand the participation, democratize it, if you will, instead of there being perhaps 100 people from all the science teams involved into thousands.
Right. I love the Mars Desert Research Station. I've just posted the links to MDRS at the Mars Society. I don't think I went out there not as a participant, but we took our robots and our balloons out there. Gosh, it would have been with Atlanta, Georgia Tech, a crew from Georgia Tech out there, where we put our balloons up and use it as a comms relay. And this is early days of GIS mapping. This would have been maybe 2004 and 2005. Yeah, I'm a big fan of MDRS. I have been for a long time. And
let me tell you a story about it.
Please, yeah.
On MDRS command, on our first motorized EVA, north of the Hab, and then we climbed this little hill, and from this little hill we could see this, and we said that'd be an interesting place to explore. So we went over there, we climbed down into the canyon, extreme athletic climb, but it was something a wheeled robot couldn't do. It was a 2-meter drop, this little canyon, and we're there exploring around, and eventually I find this very curious Jen Hellman, who was at that time a graduate student in geology, and now she's at NASA. But she said, this looks like dinosaur bone to the happened. She thin sliced it, and sure enough, it was dinosaur bone, and we reported it to the Bureau of Land Management. 2007, people from the Burpee Paleontological Organization contact the BLM and say, has anybody over there found any dinosaurs? People found a fossil at these GPS coordinates. So they went there and they dug the place up. It's the largest find of dinosaur fossils in North America since Dinosaur National Monument. And it was done by us in sim, that is wearing under the same constraints we'd face on Mars. And I could tell you for a fact, because I was there, no robotic rover would have even found the canyon, let alone get down into it. And so this is the kind of exploration that human explorers cannot do.
Yeah, that's amazing. Obviously, I'm a big fan of sending people out there. I don't, robots are helpers. Robots are early vanguard missions. But at the end of the day, if we're not sending people out there, and ultimately, if we're not having children out there, we're just camping. So camping is fun. I like camping, but I don't think that's what you signed up for. That's not what I'm signed up for. And robots are going to always be around. They're certainly very important, but it's no surprise that there's limitations to what they can do. And I don't think it's every day you get to find a dinosaur bone or a whole dig site. I think that's pretty rare, but pretty amazing. Let me ask, there's a couple of questions coming in from the audience here. And I know we are going to meander a little bit. I want to make sure we cover some of the questions. You were talking about Mars Direct. Doug Plott is asking what the status is given the advent of Starship. Now, I want to talk about Starship in a lot of detail tonight. So if you want to give a short answer and we can come back to it, or we can just jump straight into it. Or do you want to stick with Mars Desert Research Station and answer a different question? Which way do you want to go?
I'll answer this. Okay. Mars Society has projects, but I think actually the most effective work we've done is just simply spread the vision. It will recruit to its banner the forces necessary for its realization. And among those by the vision is Elon Musk. And he accomplishments are his own. But we definitely had a role in helping him. And so he created SpaceX, and they had launched by a factor of 5 after it was stagnant for 40 years, from 1970 $10,000 a kilogram to orbit, steady as a rock. Now it's gone down to 2,000 successful, which is a fully reusable launch vehicle. The Falcons are only partially reusable. It has 5 times the lift capability of the Falcon 9. Then they'll probably cut it by another factor of 5 or so. And the reason why it's not just to make money, we already had a lot of money. It's to make humanity secular by settling Mars.
Right.
And this Starship uses methane oxygen propellant, which is the propellant I specified for the Earth return vehicle in Mars Direct. This propellant to make on Mars out of carbon dioxide and water, which is what is available. It's actually the second best propellant there is after hydrogen oxygen, and much easier to do. So Starship uses methane oxygen, and his mission architecture, it's not exactly the same architecture, but it's a variant of Mars Direct. Once again, it's direct launch to Mars. There's no on-orbit assembly line to refuel the Starship, and then direct flight to Mars and long duration mission and refueling on Mars with propellant made from resources for direct flight back mission architecture. So, NASA, without very strong presidential leadership of the kind that, frankly, we haven't had any, and not only the president, but without strongest with bipartisan public spirit that we haven't had since the 60s. The government can't lead this, but he's leading it. And I think Starship makes it to orbit next year and is coming to orbit frequently in 2020. President elected, and they're going to look at this thing. If the reality that we're living in 2020, fully reusable vehicles flying up and down to orbit with Saturn V class capability, but 3%, and they have the capability of coming back with the propellant made on Mars. If that is, whoever's elected is going to turn to his or her advisors and say, look, here's this character wants to go to Mars. He's got together with him. Could we have people on Mars before the end of my second term? And the answer is going to be yes. Well, will it cost $1 trillion? No, it probably could be done within NASA's existing budget. There's a bunch of stuff he doesn't have. We can develop with him. We can do this thing. Well, then we're going to do this. So by making it practically, he's going to make it sellable. That's not fate. There's a lot of things that could throw that off, including, Taker, and he's constantly skating close to the edge of the ice. And he could fall off the edge, in which case it won't. But he's already proven a point, which is that it's a well-led entrepreneurial team to do things that were previously thought that only the governments, and not only that, do them in 1/3 the time at 1/10 the cost, and even do things they deemed impossible, like reusable. And and he's already being emulated, and not just by others and Branson and so forth, but by working engineers who've managed to mobilize investors, the most lab, the New Zealand company, no less. I mean, New Zealand reached orbit, and they're about to send probes to Venus and Mars through entrepreneurial. Musk has already changed the picture here. SpaceX is the one that pulls it off, but if SpaceX should not the banner and carry it all the way.
I like your idea. You surprised me maybe 2 months ago when when on a different show, maybe 3 months ago when you were on a different show with us, and you were talking about how 2024 is an election year. Everybody knows that, but the crossover between SpaceX's capabilities really probably being showcased at that point. I mean, there's a good chance they're going to launch a demonstration mission either the end of this month or early next month, and that should tell us whether or not, if the FAA and EPA approve their launch licenses, they probably are going to launch in the next 2 weeks, 6 weeks. We don't really know for sure, but that will demonstrate some pretty significant capabilities. And we all know that the SpaceX team has no problem crashing and burning for the sake of science. And so if that happens, that's okay. We all know that that's their mode of operation. But the convergence between 2024 for an election year and 2024 of having constant, regular, reliable, reusable, massive capacity to and from space, that was pretty interesting. So I'd like you to kind of expand on that. Let's pull out your crystal ball and tell me what you think 2023 and 2024 look like. And then how do we get from that point to a landed mission within 2 terms? I really want to dig into how do we get to a landed mission within 2 terms?
Okay. Well, first things first. I believe that this winter, the Ukraine will expel the Russian invasion, and this thing will end. But, or at least this active war will end. But what will have been made clear here is the importance of this is actually a space war. Ukrainians are winning because space assets, space-based reconnaissance, space Starlink, space-based navigation that guides, precision-guided. Okay.
I believe this war justifies the entire creation of U.S. Space Force. That's my own opinion, but there's no way.
Although we already had military space program, it was in the Air Force. Okay, and there should be a separate service. I think there's arguments pro and con. I lean, but anyway, this will make it clear, and the way, therefore, what a tremendous asset to the country. They're launching Falcons now at a rate of one a week. One a year. That's what more than what the shuttle dreamed it could do, but could not do. Actually doing it, and if you have a war between major powers right now, the space asset, whoever, and in any war, someone's going to destroy your space asset, put more up, and that launch capability is decisive. And this is going to be another reason why the people, the very serious people, the grown-ups, the best possible space program in this country, and that means we have to have exploration, because that's how you're going to get millions of youth to want to become aerospace engineers, other kinds of scientists. In fact, it's going to lift all our boats. Apollo, we doubled our science and engineering graduates in the 60s in every field, and in some areas, Apollo made science the great adventure, and youth loves adventure. Okay, that's a police siren in New York.
Sorry, yeah.
But this is going to make it clear. It's going to make it very clear to all the most serious people that preeminence in space, the British Empire, the control of the sea, and what was for the past World War II control of the air, control of space is everything. And go beyond that, because with Starship or similar vehicles, SpaceX emulators, it's going to become possible to settle Mars. We're going to become an interplanetary civilization, an interplanetary culture. It's going to drive innovation like nothing we've ever seen before in history. I mean, the American frontier and American frontier culture drove the 19th century. You had tremendous labor shortage on the frontier, and therefore a drive for, which means public education. It means a culture of invention, magazines like Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, just a whole people that are geared up for racing for patents is kind of a sport. Sport with a big, but whether you're talking about Edison or the Wright brothers, these culture, which tremendously progressive, and by progressive I mean not in this technological sense, and the it will open the door to an age for humanity.
I 100% agree. So let's focus in on 2023. You said that, you think that the Ukrainians will push back the Russians. I sure hope that's true. I think it's also true. That changes the kind of political landscape. Presuming we don't have a great war where the Russians and the Chinese and it's not a domino effect and things kind of normalize out. I don't know what that looks like, but then you've got SpaceX, which is obviously the kind of front runner right now, but you've got, I don't know. I mean, I think the United States has 8 orbital class companies. ULA, Sierra Space is close, Astra's close, Blue, Rocket Lab. There's about 6 or 7 or 8 American companies. I think there's one organization in Europe that can get orbital, Ariane Space, and then there's India. There are a few organizations that can do this, but it's not just SpaceX that's doing reusable rocketry. They're the ones that are in the vanguard, but they're not the only game in town anymore. So then fast forward to 2024, we've got demonstrated capacity, demonstrated capability, massive launch, interest, right? I think that's what you talked about. Maybe the biggest impact of the Mars Society is just building global interest in this. So then what do you imagine happens in the White House? Whomever wins, red or blue, whomever wins, what do you think those conversations have to look like at the White House to say, okay, how do we put a crew together by something by 2028 and something else by 2032, people on the ground by 2032? What do you think those steps have to look like? Because I really don't know.
About the technical steps?
No, I think these are probably more budgetary and policy that leads to technical development, right?
Okay. Well, look. Okay, first of all this nonsense. I mean, just look at the kind of money we were able to put into action when COVID hit.
Right. Yeah.
You want $2 trillion? How about $6 trillion?
Yeah.
Okay,
Here's some more money. Want some more money?
Okay. Okay. We decide to do something, and preeminence in space going to be clear that it is a matter of national survival. It's going to be as important to the United States as preeminence at sea, and it's going to be very clear, and so it's going to be supported. But if it shapes the whole climate in which you conceive of not just of the military space program and of its importance, and and it wasn't just the British Navy that was important to the British government. It was the British Merchant Marine and and British explorers and so forth. And but we're going to become a spacefaring nation in a very real sense. And look, SLS just flew, but the booster just flew, and it worked. And Starship's going to be a heavy lift booster. Falcon Heavy is a semi-heavy. HEM is a semi-heavy, and that'll be flying probably in 2024. So, Rocket Lab's heavy. It's semi-heavy. It's not a true heavy, but it's semi-heavy booster. We're going to have all these capabilities. So, looking at the Mars exploration program by which I mean the robotic program, doing missions that are limited to 1-ton payloads on Mars. We're going to have the capability of landing 10 very quickly. Okay. And so that robotic exploration of Mars, instead of landing a single rover, we'll land a platoon of them. It'll be like Normandy beat. Plank will come down and the robots will come out. And the ground rovers and the helicopters and this, and you'll have robotic expedition will enormously enhance our pure scientific exploration capability, but it also will exercise capabilities needed for human missions. So when the first humans land on Mars, they're going to be landing on Mars and landings 8 or 10 or 12 times. And they'll be landing in which perhaps robotic constructors will even build up a significant amount of infrastructure, set of plants and in situ propellant manufacturing and habitations, check it. And so I think this is what's going to happen. And and I think the goal, due to the nature of our political system, 2032.
Outstanding. I can imagine what those conferences in the White House would look like. Because most people don't know what the heck we're talking about, right? They don't have the background, they don't have the knowledge. Does kind of I'm going to call it Mars Direct 1.0, does it need to be a 2.0 to take into account Starship? Does there need to be kind of
if Starship becomes I wrote a paper on this a few years ago, looking at using starships. Now I have a difference with, he wants to fly the Starship all the way to Mars, refuel it, and send it back. That's a suboptimal architecture. I think he ought to create a mini Starship to lift it to orbit and send the mini Starship to Mars, because something about one thing, basically sized by itself to be a reusable upper stage for a Falcon 9 combination. It would be a fully reusable medium lift system. But the idea of sending it to Mars, and it would be much easier to refuel to send home. Now, that's for exploration. Now, if you're settlement, then you send the big starships all the way to Mars, and you don't send them back. That is, a Starship is terrific as a one-way freight. Starship on Mars, you got an apartment building on Mars. Okay, but it's not something you want to have to refuel to send back. So for the function of returning crews, now Musk says to me, he says, "Look, tell me why I need it." Tell me.
Let me just reiterate that. Musk says to you personally, you are having that conversation, right?
I had that conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not having that conversation today, but I had that conversation. And it says, "Tell me why I need it, not why it would be good to have.
Right.
Tell me why I must have it. Okay, because there's a lot of things that would be good to have." And I says, that question is exactly the right question. It's the question NASA never. You tell them you don't need a lunar orbit gateway to go to the moon, and they say, but it might come in handy. There's a million things that might come in handy, and if you try to do them all, you never get to do the mission you're trying to do. But Musk is very focused on only doing what is necessary. Now, okay, because if you go with the big Starship and you want to come back, you need 5 times the in situ propellants, the power plant on Mars to drive it, than you would need with a mini Starship. So the trade is either power system on Mars, and then all you need is Starship, just one flight. You add in a mini starship, and then you don't need anywhere near. Okay, that's the trade. Okay, and I guess it's because I work on in situ propellant manufacturing things that he knows all the problems in developing a flight system, developing an in situ propellant manufacturing. So the problem that each of us face seems big, which is seen at a distance. But anyway, but I absolutely do agree with his fundamental position, which is don't tell me I don't absolutely need.
Perfect. Perfect. So, this our program is primarily about the money, finance, and capitalization of space. We have about a little more than 10 minutes here. I want to make sure that we talk about some of that. So, you're at the White House. You've got your National Space Council out there. Your vice president's kind of paying attention. Everybody's giving that person some advice and some information. And okay, there's this company out in California. Yep, they probably have some capabilities. What now that the commercial sector in space is arguably larger than the governmental sector in space. Maybe the defense sector is a little bit bigger still, but the commercial sector is getting pretty good size now. They've got a lot of capabilities. They've got a lot of robustness and redundancy. I apologize for the noise out there. I can't do anything about it. I'll mute in a moment. But what do you think the budget comes in? Let's just put a baseline of let's put 5 people or 10 people on the ground. Assume that we're going to have some beginnings of permanence, whatever that means. You define it how you want. The beginnings of permanence, 5 to 10 people crew, and your deadline's 2032. How much is this going to cost? And where do you think how does the commercial sector become a part of it, and how much do they have to put in?
Well, the commercial sector is what's driving it. That is, this is only going to happen us. Musk is there saying, look, I've got the ship. So, these people would take him to do something, except that now the opportunity is going to be so clear that it's going to be compelling. So you say how much is going to cost? NASA budget this year is like what, $24 billion or something. I think the NASA budget and the military space budgets are both going to be the current crisis, and probably both increased by about a fact compared to where they are now. For the same reason that the part of the military to one of the main parts, and after World War II, and ever since, and it's going to be very essential. It's going to be central to our to our economy and to our national. And but no, it's not going to cost $1 trillion to go to Mars. That once Starship is flying, Starship flight's going to cost like 100. You talk about takes 5 Starship flights to send, so it's $500 million to send a Starship to Mars, and the problem was too, so about $1 billion to do the first human mission to Mars once the Starship exists. Then further missions would be about $500 million using that architecture. Once again, then only one Starship launched to orbit is needed to send a small expedition. The Starship is overkill for exploration. Although heavy lift vehicles to send the other things, so you can't beat it. The now you're talking about sending 100 settlers tomorrow, not 10. Okay. And Musk told me that he thinks it'll cost him $10 million. And he's not building a ship down there in Boca Chica. He's building a shipyard. At a rate of like one a month or so.
Right. That's a super important point. Not just building one vehicle, but the factory to build a set of vehicles. His stated goal is 3 flights a day. 3 flights a day with his with 1,000 flights a year. What else do you
okay,
use?
whatever. It's a gigantic number. Even if it's only the same rate he's actually accomplished with the Falcons, which is 1 a week
Right.
instead of 20. And about the same cost to orbit as the current 20. That's why I'm saying another factor of 5 reduction in cost. But anyway, he's talking about making these things. And by the Starship, in this, I mean the actual upper stage Starship, not the super heavy. Because that never leaves Earth. It's the one that goes to Mars. He says they could make them for 10 million, so we'd probably be willing to sell them for 20. And here's the thing: reusable spaceships means there will be used spaceships. Not that for a minute. There's going to be used spaceships around.
Right.
Okay. Right now, new cars are pretty expensive, but even people who don't have very much money can have a. So they don't have to pay $30,000 for a new car. They can pick up and buy it on credit and pay $100 a month or something, and have wheels. That's what the fact that there are used cars means. Everybody can have a car now. So reusable vehicles like Starships are going to travel. Okay, so let's say some people want to go to Mars. They pick up a used Yakana Starship that's reached the end of its life on the Mexico City. If it sells used for $5 million divided by 100 people is $50,000 a person, and fly it one way to Mars.
That's a good business model. I like that.
Okay, so you're talking about $50,000 is not chump change, but move. If someone wants to change their life, if someone wants to emigrate, it's the kind of money people and do. You sell your house, whatever. Get a loan. So once there's a lot of used Starships or comparables running around, then it will be possible for her and be driven from the bottom up.
Amazing. I love that vision of where we're going. Let's swing it back to the Mars Society directly. As an organization, we're going to talk. We've talked to James Burke a little bit. We're going to talk to him again next week. I know that you all have some fundraising plans coming up. You're trying to get your analog sites, the primary one, MDRS upgrade, and then the flashline one really retrofitted. So in our remaining 4 minutes, can you just talk about what your plans are, what your financial requirements are, and what you plan to do with it?
Well, okay. Well, the Mars Desert Station will continue, and we're going to augment it with this virtual reality that I discussed earlier. We do plan to send an expedition to the Arctic next. We're going to put out a call for volunteers. And it's going to cost a lot of money, so I want the crew to half of the money by organizing sponsorships. We're going to look to the crew, perhaps $120,000 worth of sponsorships, or basically $20,000 per person. I think it should be possible. Also, we're hoping that there will be companies that step forward that want to become sponsors and get the station named after them. The station's called the Flashline Mars Arctic Research Station because we're a company called Flashline, and they donated 175 named after them. Now, those naming rights only were for 5 years. In fact, since then, so they've gotten quite the bargain, more than they paid for. And I'm not sure if Flashlight is a company, but they certainly got their money's worth because there's been hundreds of newspaper articles about that state for the price of, a single page ad in a glossy magazine that people, while they're sitting in the barbershop waiting for their turn, the coverage. So we're open now to someone else stepping up like that. But there'll be an announcement.
What would be the price tag for the naming rights? Do you know, or has that been decided? Is that public?
It's not public. It's
okay.
But we'd be looking for substantial money. But But anyway, there it is. So the public within a few days. So people who heard it first.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Dr. Zubrin, it's always a terrific conversation with you. Really want to give you a shout out to you and to all the people that were at the Mars Society conference in Arizona a couple weeks ago. Terrific job, fascinating content. For those in the Mars Society that are watching our show right now, it was an honor for us, our team, to handle some of the digital side, and many of those videos from the event are going to be posted here in the coming weeks. We've already gotten the first batch, still private. They're still private within the Mars Society YouTube channel, but we'll have the rest of them up here very soon. All right. Dr. Zubrin, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. Have a great evening. I appreciate you taking the time out tonight. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, so